Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming early to this webinar. We'll just give it another minute to let people in, or I'll wait till it's on the dot, and then I'll start with introductions. Right. Okay. People still joining us, but we've got a little bit of introduction first, just to give people time to join us. We had quite a few people signing up in advance, so just want to make sure that everyone's got some time to join us. Thank you very much for taking time out of your day today to join us to learn more about this really important topic around online or website accessibility. We've wanted to do this session for a long time now, but for various reasons, it seemed to be the right time for us. We've been working with a few inclusive arts organisations, and that's always helped us to sort of just review what we already know and adapt it to changing technology. So we'll be able to share some of those learnings with you. The format for today is our usual webinar format. We're going to talk for about 40 minutes. I'll introduce you to the speakers in a moment, and then about 15-20 minutes of questions and answers from you. So as you're listening, as you think of any questions, please put them in the chat box as soon as you think of them. Bear in mind that if you're thinking of them, chances are someone else would like to know that as well. So don't be shy in coming forward with your questions. I should say that you might have noticed that we've switched on the live transcript for this webinar. There's a button at the bottom of the screen, hopefully on Zoom, which says live transcript. You can use that button to either switch them off if you don't feel you need them, or you can change it to, I think it gives you different formats. There's a web transcript which appears on the side, or there's subtitles that appear underneath, and you can change the format of that as might suit you. So I mentioned questions, I mentioned captions. Yes, I'd like to finish now with some introductions. Before I introduce your speakers for today, it'd be really helpful if you could introduce yourself in the chat box. We'd love to know who you are, where you're from, who you work with, and also what you want to get out of this session today. The more of that, we'll be reading those in moments when we're not talking, so it'll really help us, inform us about who we're talking to today, and then it'll hopefully improve how we deliver what we're giving you today. So while you're doing that, let me do some introductions to the team. We have got Victoria. She has, we've been with HdK for a couple of months now, and this is her first webinar. She's part of the web support team, and as such, recently, as we've been working with a few clients, she's been gathering the learnings that we have and making sure they're documented and available for the team to reference when they need them. So she's picked up a lot of experience in this area over the last few weeks. Ben is one of our project managers. He will guide our clients as we're building websites and we're going through our discovery phase, and will indicate when features and requests aren't quite accessible and hopefully guide them in the right direction. So I think he's going to be really useful in the question and answer session as well. Yannick is one of our technical leads. He has recently been, or he is currently working with one of our New York clients, Movement Research, and helping them focus on the accessibility side of what they wanted. There's something that they've decided is really important. And also recently worked on a website that we launched, I think last week, for Stopgap Dance. So again, a lot of experience there to share with the team. Hiding in the wings, I know he's there, is Raf, who's our creative director. He's been building websites for over 20 years now, and has really learned what visually are the considerations when we're thinking about web accessibility. And just making sure things go smooth is Meg. So thank you, Meg, for looking after us today on this webinar. So I want to crack on, because I really want to leave as much time as I can for your questions. So let me hand over to Victoria. And Victoria, can you share with us what's important about, what do we mean by website accessibility, and also what's important. And I realized I've just skipped through the points that we're going to cover in today's session. So Meg, if you just want to bring up those points. So these are the things we're going to cover. And they were on the blurb about today's webinar as well. So those are the things we're going to cover. I'll hand over to Victoria now.
Great, thanks Hans. So hi everyone, it's great to see so many of you here to discuss such an important topic. So before I pass you over to Ben and Jeanette, who will be discussing some tools and technical considerations for accessibility, I'd like to define accessibility and usability and explore why it's so important to take a user-first approach when considering the design of a website. So accessibility is the process of creating an equivalent user experience for all, so that everybody can access the information that they want or need in an efficient way and at the time that they need it. So accessibility is primarily focused on, but not limited to, supporting the access needs of people with auditory, visual, physical, or cognitive disabilities to be able to access, process, and navigate information on a site in a way which best suits their situation. So I'd like to talk a bit about why accessibility matters. So creating with accessibility in mind as a first step not only opens up online services and experiences to more people, it also reflects the nature of design, which is change, and how important it is to follow that change and diversity in order to provide the best possible experience for everyone. So I'd also just like to mention that there's also a huge gap in knowledge about how to create websites with cognitive disabilities in mind, which emphasises the need for discussion and its importance. So I'd like to talk a bit about how we can frame accessibility for positive progression. So this may seem like the elephant in the room, but the reason for the imbalance in accessibility, or why there is still a huge gap in knowledge and also information reach for those with access needs, can be down to the biases created by people who don't necessarily experience those circumstances. So creating for people, for those people with access needs, will reduce the imbalances. I think we can all appreciate that it's not necessarily, it's not so easy to cover this 100%, but here are some ways that we can kind of mitigate that imbalance. So by conducting regular user testing and talking directly to people with disabilities and access needs in order to make navigation of a website easier and more time efficient, instead of kind of tailoring it and allowing those people to adjust the site for themselves in a way which should have kind of already been developed for them. I also think it's important to think about who you may be excluding as a result of the current design. So if we are developing online services as a result of our ability to kind of hear, see, touch, we're ignoring a massive proportion of people who have access needs. So I'd like to mention that huge progress has been made to ensure that we're lowering any kind of pre-existing boundaries to what we can achieve when designing for accessibility. And again, we can all appreciate that it's not 100% possible to create all websites from scratch for those people, but it's important to encourage people to create for and meet people with access needs halfway. So the question is, how do we continue pushing for positive change, and how can we frame accessibility and usability issues to those people who may not understand its importance? So I invite you to think of it in this way. If it's not accessible, it's not usable. So if we exclude someone from using a website because we have tailored it for what is considered to follow our natural biases, we're making it harder for those people to gain access to the information that they need and are technically disabling them from using the site. So I'm now going to show you a video that we have from Lucy Collins. So HdK recently had the opportunity to take part in a user testing session for one of our clients, Stopgap Dance Company, which was led by Lucy Collins from the company Web Usability. So we'll now show you that interview, and she'll be telling us a bit about how she approaches user testing. So can you tell us a bit about your organisation, Web Usability?
Okay, hello. My name is Lucy Collins. I work for an organisation called Web Usability. We are a user experience agency, so we are all about being the voice of the customer for our users. We do this by conducting lots of research with users, both kind of usability testing to understand what works and what doesn't work about digital services, discovery research to understand what people want from digital services, and also accessibility. So how well or otherwise do these digital services work for people with accessibility needs and disability?
So what are some of the most common accessibility updates in your testing sessions?
Accessibility, I guess we see it as a sort of continuation of usability. It all sits on a spectrum, and accessibility, or people with accessibility requirements, often just shine a spotlight on issues that are relevant to all users of the internet. So you have both sort of usability, accessibility issues, I would say, which is in terms of how well content is written, how accessible it is, the design, the colours that have been used on the website. But then you've also got the very technical side of accessibility, which is how compliant is a website with the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. From that point of view, the key issues that we tend to see are how well are websites built to work with assistive technology. So how well does it work with a screen reader or a screen magnifier or speech recognition software? Because often that is an issue when things have not been coded up correctly, or the technical build of the website isn't quite right. And that gets quite tricky, quite technical, quite quickly. But there are many elements of accessibility that are a lot more general in terms of, as I said, the design, the colours that are used, the branding that is used, how the images are displayed, what images are displayed and where, as well as obviously the language that's being used and making sure that that's clear, simple and jargon-free, which obviously is something that's going to benefit everyone who uses a website, regardless of any accessibility requirements.
So what were the key outcomes from your work with Stopgap? Are these things relevant to other websites?
So we obviously had the pleasure of working with Stopgap Productions, who are in the process of building a new website, and we wanted to test it with some users with disabilities. So we did a single session with an individual who had motor impairment, so suffered from multiple sclerosis, and as a result had issues doing things that required fine motor control, using a mouse and things like that. So what we did was ran the session with him via Zoom, looking to understand how well or otherwise he could use the site, and also how easy or difficult he found the site to understand. So we were setting him tasks, seeing how well he could engage with the navigation, any functionality that was on the pages, fill out forms, anything that was interactive content that might require some sort of fine motor control that might be difficult for him, as well as obviously getting general feedback from someone who perhaps wasn't as familiar with the website and what Stopgap offered. So we were getting some good feedback on the content and how well or otherwise it was working for him. The sort of the key things that came out of it, I think, was around the size of target points or touch points on the site. So for him, using little check boxes and things like that we might have no issue with was a lot more hard work for him, as well as using his speech recognition software to fill out forms, which often is not necessarily a fault of the site. The software itself can have its own issues, but making the site as easy as possible, or making sure the site works as well as possible with these technologies is always going to be important to overcome any of the obstacles that they might have using the software itself. And there was also some really helpful feedback on the content from someone who was less familiar with the Stopgap offering, I felt, in terms of how the proposition came across and how clear or otherwise it is what Stopgap did from the website. Some more general usability feedback as well as his specific accessibility requirements.
Sorry. So it was really helpful working with Lucy, and their knowledge is brilliant, and the service was really, really good, and they do this obviously all the time, and they work with really big organisations. When we run our webinars, we invite you to send in questions in advance, and Clemmy from Dance Professional Fund sent in the question, can you say more about disabled user testing? So Clemmy, we brought in your question at this point. It seems relevant to what Lucy was saying. So I guess I want to open this up to the team, the speakers here today. Lucy and Web Usability, they have a paid for service, which I think is great value. But we work with a lot of clients who don't always have the budgets to spend on this. Are there other ways that that we can, or clients can do set up some user testing?
Hi, I think I'll go first, and then I might hand over to Yannick, who I think will have a bit more to add, as he's more familiar with stopgap in this particular case. But yes, there are definitely things you can do yourself, and I'd highly encourage you to carry out your own user testing. So there's a number of ways you can do this. In fact, Web Usability have a blog on how you can do it. They'll sort of assist you along the way. But obvious ones would be things like unplugging your keyboard, also your mouse even, and seeing how easy it is to operate your website with just a keyboard, or installing a screen reader and seeing how well it works, or how well it reads out the structural web elements for you. Another one would be making sure that your website can be magnified up to 300% just by zooming in without distortion. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in my section, but if Yannick has a bit more to add, I'll let him add on now.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. So definitely there's a lot of great resources out there that you can use, but the basic or the simple pillars of what you need, what a user testing session would be, is to find a tester, and then to just define a few tasks, like sign up to the newsletter, find out about what's going on recently in the company, find out about the company, find out about the staff, just as an example, and then just watch the user go through those steps, and just at certain points you can ask them how they're finding the website, how they're finding the information, but not to point them in any direction, positive, negative. And this is basically what a user testing session is. I mean, there's more to it, and you can do a lot more things, but basically have some tasks and then complete those tasks. And then it's always good to have a debrief after to kind of talk with the team away from the tester, to kind of like see the different outcomes and different actions that can be done from the session. And
I might just add then in that case that with Lucy and Web Usability, I know that they charge based on how many users they recruit to help test your website, and obviously because each user you have will involve time that needs to be paid for. It's worth bearing in mind that and I think I've either said this in a previous webinar or I've said it recently, that there's a website guru called Jakob Nielsen who famously said that you probably only need about 5 people to find about 80% of the issues on a website. So you don't need to have a big testing army of users. You only need a few people, and with website accessibility, you can choose people maybe with different preferences on how they want to navigate through a website, and we'll give you different sort of viewpoints, I think.
Great, thank you. I think we'll move on in this, but feel free to add more questions into the chat, and we will get to them all in different points in the webinar. So you may be thinking at this point, okay, it's a huge topic. Where on earth do I start? How can I make sure that everything is sort of up to scratch? And the good news is that you heard Lucy mention the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And essentially, for those who don't know, these are a set of guidelines which basically lay out the steps that you should follow to make your website, the code and the content as accessible as possible for all users, regardless of their physical or mental capacity. They grade websites using an A rating. They're free, by the way. They're not a paid for thing. They're readily available online. And then Meg's going to share some links in the chat in just a second. So you have A, which is sort of just about okay. AA, which is sort of the good standard, certainly what we aim for. And then AAA, which is obviously the highest, but also if you conform there, you do end up kind of losing some of the flair. So what we tend to do is go for AA and pick as many AAA features as we can. without compromising the design and functionality of the website. So as I mentioned, there are two links that Meg's going to share. One is the official guidelines, but actually, ironically, we find them quite hard to read. They're very text heavy. So we're actually going to share another link, which is a bit more easy to read and summarizes them and gives you detailed steps that you can take to achieve each one. They're written by the World Wide Web Consortium, and they're based on 4 pillars of accessibility, which are: the website should be perceivable, meaning that users can perceive websites with their senses, mainly sight and hearing. Operable by mouse, keyboard, and assistive device. Of course, you might want to take into consideration newer devices now, like mobiles and tablets. Understandable without confusion, and robust so as to be accessible by a range of technologies, both new and old. For example, making sure that it's usable by Internet Explorer and the newest mobile phone. Voice search is another big topic that we're seeing a lot more of, and is driving a lot of searches. So Jeanette's going to sort of drill down into the nitty-gritty of each one of a few of these anyway, and how you can achieve them. But for now, the important thing to know is that these guidelines exist, they're out there, and there's help and resources available. So what I'd encourage you to do in terms of how you can act on this yourself is you need to sort of identify what you can control and what you have less control over. And I'd encourage a really healthy relationship between your developers, if you've got developers, or whoever manages your website, to help find these things and find ways that you can conform to these guidelines in a useful way. Hopefully your developer will know most of these things already, but there is also action you can take from your CMS or your content management system. For example, the single biggest improvement you can make would be to add alt tags to your images. And Jeanette's going to explain a lot more about that in a second, but essentially alt tags are text that describe an image if it's not there. And we see this as a common fail, and actually Meg's going to share the blog article from Web Usability which highlights this particular issue. So the things you can control is things like the design and look of your site. You might want to check that your colors are compliant with the guidelines, making sure your fonts are easy to read and not too big or too small, making sure the images have captions and are clear of what that image is of, making sure your navigation is clear and easy to follow, making sure your language and tone of voice is sort of consistent and clear. So you can see that those list of things on the left. But in terms of what you as a website admin have less control over, and things that developers have more control over, this would be things like what we called hard-coded images. So anything hard-coded is basically in the code and you don't have access to it as a user. So this is what I'd encourage you to ask your developers about. Whether your site is structured in what we call semantic HTML, and semantic HTML is basically a structure of HTML. HTML is the language that is your web page. And if it's structured in this way, it makes it very easy for screen readers to read out the sections of the web page so that the person listening doesn't get confused. Another one that might not be initially obvious is page speed, but I'd encourage you to think about this as an accessibility need, because if your website takes a long time to load, or it's a very heavy data load, people who may be on a lower data plan, if they're on a mobile phone, it is actually a luxury for them to access your web page, and you might be burning up data that's costing them money. So just have a think about how long your page speed takes to load, and there's tools that we'll share at the end that will help you assess that. I'd also encourage you to ask your developers about animations and making sure nothing's too flashy or overwhelming, and things like external links, being careful of how they operate. For example, if a link's going to take you away from your site, making sure that it's clear that it's going to do that. Iframes, which are essentially frames of another website in your browser. For example, I might share a Guardian link in a box on my web page, and embeds from third-party platforms. So at this point, I just want to reiterate that for developers, as we'll see on the next slide, there is a sort of mismatch in the terminology between what we might consider accessibility or catering for accessibility, and what web developers might feel the same. So I'd really encourage you to check that everyone knows what the terminology is that you're using and what the overall aim is. Basically, developers for web accessibility, it's easy to focus on things like the very technical things like page speed and making sure it's coded correctly. And while this is important, it's also important to make sure that you consider how your content is structured, the length of your text, the brightness of your colors and images. And this is something that you have a lot more say over when you're going through the process of designing it and making sure it's easy to use and understand. And it's not necessarily something that a sole developer is responsible for. So I'd encourage you to have that conversation and just identify what you're all talking about, making sure you're on the same page. And as I mentioned, my main takeaway is to identify the things you can control and the things you can't, and seek help for the things you can't. So I mentioned there's a lot of resources available, and all of these will be available on a handout that we'll share at the end. But I'd like to just sort of demonstrate very quickly some of the things that are out there. I mentioned the color, making sure that your color contrast is correct. This is a very important design feature. And it's something that we do for all our designs. You basically put it through this nifty tool, which is available on a website called WebAIM, and it kind of looks like this. So on the left-hand side, you can see that the blue with a white background passes the criteria for both A and AA for the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. But if I were to change that same blue to have a black background, it says fail. Clear fail for all of those, and you can sort of play around with it and see and make sure that you get colors that conform to the right standard. As I mentioned, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines are available on the next link. There's another slightly more technical tool called Wave, which is available from the same website. And what this does is you put your URL in, and it basically goes through the code and says what's bad about it. And your web developer is going to love you for this, because it gives you clear points about what is the problem. So for example, you can see that there are 49 errors, and most of those for this particular website, and this is just a random website, by the way, I'm not picking holes at anyone particular. Some of those alt tags are missing, some of those images are missing, there's some JavaScript defaults, and it gets a bit more technical, but it's very useful to hand over to your developers if they're not already aware of it. Some other tools that we have are, there's more resources available on WebAIM. It's a very good website. As I mentioned before, there was testing guidelines on how to carry out your own user testing, and some slightly more technical tools is a tool called Lighthouse. Again, it's a developer tool, but it's something to recommend. Then there's also a good read here that I found from Google, which is Google's Web Fundamentals for Accessibility. And this kind of summarizes a lot of what we've been talking about today, and sort of bridges the gap between how you might use it as a website admin and how you might have that relationship with your developer. So my takeaway is test. Consider asking a professional to help you, or running a session yourself if you can't for any reason. There are resources out there, and it's definitely an important thing to do pre-launch and ongoing. So yeah, if there are any questions, we'll try and answer them now before we move on.
I don't think there are any specific questions at the moment, other than things that we've all been able to answer as we went along.
Great. Okay. Well, then in that case, I'll hand over to Jeanette.
Hello, everyone. So you've got your website. Oh, thank you, Ben, by the way, that was great. And also Victoria and also Hans. So you've got your website. It's AA, III compliant as you need it. Sometimes what I see is that then the conversation ends. So the accessibility is kind of done, and then the website kind of goes on. But it's really how you work with your content, how you work with your website that keeps the ongoing accessibility requirements, or it keeps the website accessible. So what I mean is I'm going to go through some of the main considerations. So this is not an exhaustive list. This is just the main points that I see. So links, alt tags or alternate tags, as Ben was saying, colors and fonts, content flow, social media considerations, and then email considerations as well. So this is when you're putting in the content, how you put it in. So to kick it off with links. So here I've got two examples of links that are downloading PDFs. So immediately, and for me, it's really clear to see what the link on the right is doing. It says click here to download PDF, and it's very clear that the link, you click on it to download the PDF. And I think this illustrates quite clearly what Victoria was saying about the usability and accessibility, but it's on the same kind of spectrum. Making things usable or making things accessible makes them usable, or the other way around. So the WCAG point is that all links should be descriptive of where they're going. So one of those reasons is that so that you can clearly visually see what the link is doing. And the other one is that for a screen reader will read the one on the left. It'll say something like link here, whereas the one on the right will say link, click here to download PDF. So it makes it immediately clear what it is that's going on. So when you're putting in links, just be mindful that the links themselves, the text that you're using is descriptive of what it's doing. I see the classic here or this as well in emails, especially. Yeah, so this is the main takeaway for links. So the next one, alt tags. So alt tags are for when an image doesn't load. So it's going to describe the image in text. Well, it's going to be a placeholder for that image. So this is either if the image doesn't load for whatever reason, that there's a stop in the internet, or you're on a low data plan, as Ben was saying, or you've switched off images, or you have a visual impairment and you're not using the image. You're using a screen reader, for example. So alt tags are needed for an image that conveys meaning. So I'll go through an example, but just to say that if it's an image that's part of a design, but it doesn't necessarily need an alt tag. So I want to show this example here of the Zog website. So we have quite a few images here, and something that wouldn't need an alt tag would possibly be this part of the smoke here. And these little stars in the background, little circles. The reason being that they're something about it's more about design and how it looks, and it doesn't necessarily convey meaning. Whereas this creature here, the Zog creature, this would use an alt tag because it's to do with the context of the website. And this down here at the bottom, depending if it's text or if it's an image, would need an alt tag as well. I'm just going to check the chat because I saw, okay. So if you do have any questions, do let me know about as we go through. But to show you an example of what a website would look like when an image doesn't load, I'll show you with as well. So the top example doesn't have an alt tag, and the bottom example does have an alt tag. So to read it out, I'll read out the top one. If there's one thing I care more about anything, if there's one thing I care about more than anything, it's how we interact with our environment. There's one thing in particular that I like to pay attention to. Then there's an image, but we don't know what it is. The forests around us are very important to social and ecological development of communities. So then the bottom one, if there's one thing I care about more than anything, it's how we interact with our environment. There's one thing in particular that I like to pay attention to, an image of trees. The forests around us are very important to social and ecological development of communities. So you can see how using an alt tag helps give context and meaningful description or meaningful content to someone that's doesn't have that image for any reason. So the WCAG point is that all relevant images should have alt tags. Yes, so I'm just going to read out a question. So the alt tag could be fairly simple. Yes, so you can think of it in terms of drier terms. In terms of it's more about structurally giving context or content to the surrounding text. So something that would use more detailed description is an image description. So just to say, this is an image description as a consideration for users that are partially sighted. So this would be if you're partially sighted, you can't pick out all the detail, but having the image description will allow you to either understand the context and content or able to pick out the content. But just to say, this is not part of the WCAG compliant checklist. Alt tag is. So this is where you would use a more expressive description of the image. So this one says photo from a live outdoor performance, and Nadan balances in a shouldered stand in his wheelchair, his head pressed against the pavement and hands bracing himself as he lifts his lower body and chair into the air. He looks towards the front of the image and we see the underside of his chair. Nadan is brown-skinned Cambodian man. He wears a floral yellow dress, black fingerless workout gloves and black trainers. A crowd of people watches in the background. So this is an image description because it describes what's in it. I'm just going to go back. An alt tag, you just need kind of the structural content and how it relates to the content around it. So colors and fonts. So in general, oh yeah, go on, Hans.
Raf, you might just want to, sorry, Yannick, you might want to pick up what's just been posted.
I was advised not to use an image of as part of the alt text, but I don't know if that's right. Oh, okay, so yes, it depends on exactly how it's going. In general, the screen reader technology will read out saying image and then the next part. So you are correct that I will go back, that when the screen reader gets to, if there's one thing I care about, it'll say image and image of trees. So you're doubling the text. So you're correct, that then it would be trees in a frame. So colors and fonts, in general, make sure that it can be read. What I mean by this is don't make it too small, don't make it too big. Sometimes this is already handled within your design. The brand of the website will automatically be making the fonts. But if you do have control, make sure that you can read the text, that it's not too small. You can use an online color checker as Ben showed. And once you start, I would say make sure you stay within them so you have some consistency across the website. So if you use blue for links, continue using blue. Don't change to orange, red, unless there's some sort of meaningful reason for changing those colors. And make sure to keep your text accessible. So I want to show this tweet. I think it kind of shows itself. So this is a screen reader reading out this text at the top. So I'm just going to play it for a bit.
A bit louder.
Mathematical script small c, mathematical script small u, mathematical script small t, e2, mathematical sans serif fold small d, mathematical sans serif fold smaller, mathematical sans serif fold small.
Did everybody hear that? Great. So it's really clear in this example because they've used a lot of different, so italics and mathematical scripts. And although probably it won't be so heavy when this is done, used before, but it's being used for some sort of design reason. And just be mindful that if you overuse these kind of scripts, it's going to sound like this when you read it out as a screen reader. Another thing is that when you switch between a lot of different fonts, for me, that's quite difficult to read. So it's easier sometimes to keep with simple. This especially happens in kind of social media platforms where you do get the ability to change your typography a lot. So I'm just going to check in the chat. What font is best used? In general, fonts, it's when you overly use italics, bold, and there it's using mathematical script. So it's when you're using, it's more like social media things where perhaps you've copy and pasted text from somewhere, or you're using different types of text. For example, it's a mathematical scripts that they're used for on the web. for example, like the Greek characters, it's not a Greek it's using the Greek alphabet, but using mathematical versions of it. So then, because it looks nice to have like an X at the top of perhaps like a title of a piece, then it'll say at the top mathematical X at the top. And it's fine when used sparingly, but when it's overused, then you get this kind of thing where you have a lot of text in order to describe a text for a screen reader. So it's less about is it Tahama or Arial, or it's more about if you're overusing these kind of special fonts. So content flow. So content flow is basically reading from the top to bottom, and it makes sense. So I've put here over this image of the header. Now, this is what we call semantic HTML. And just to show you what it's like, I do have another example of how to explain this. But basically, good content flow means when you read from top to bottom, it makes sense. So bad content flow would if we started at the header here and then dropped down to the article down here, and then went over to the aside. And this is normally, we handle this when we code it. But when I see content flow break is when a website is used as is not intended. So for example, using a title as a quote. And the reason that would happen is because you would want big text. And I'm just going to show this example here. Just going to wait for the thing to pop away. There we go. I've put together an article. I've put together 2 examples of the same article. And I want to bring attention over to the left here. So this is the content flow. We've got a title, then we've got a subtitle, then we've got a quote and some copy as well. Then we come up again and we go to a title, and we come to some more subtitle and then paragraph. So it makes sense in terms of we know what's happening within this. We know it's an important concern about our environment. So everything running down from this list is to do with this. Then we have taking action now and tuner, and we know that it's in there. So basically when a screen reader goes through, it will understand, it'll be simple, it's easy to understand what's inside those sections. And again, it comes back to the spectrum of usability, accessibility. It also makes it more usable. This is what I mean when good content flow makes sense. So coming down, I've put a bad content flow where instead of using a quote, I've used a title as the title as well. So we have important concerns. And then on the same level, we have why we need to take action now. And on the same level, we have trees of the future. And then we drop down to a paragraph, back up again for tuner. So because it's being used in, then the structure being used for the design rather than intention. Although on the right here, it looks interesting. On the left, the content flow is kind of jumping all over the place, which then means that a screen reader will not know how to place value. And also, it's difficult to read in terms of placing value as well visually, because they're all kind of been given the same value in terms of their size. So if normally it depends on how your website has been coded as to how you need to handle quotes or handle titles. But in general, it's using the website as is intended. So use a title for a title. Check if you're hard coding it, you have to code it in such a way. But if you're using a CMS like WordPress or Drupal or Wix, for example, make sure that you're using a title for a title, a paragraph for a paragraph. So some considerations for social media. It's going to depend on the social media platform you're using, how far you can go. But in general, there are some things you can do. So you can use alt tags where possible. Keep your text accessible. This is the same Twitter post. So not overly using special fonts. And also you can use for hashtags as well. You can use camel case, which is just basically where you capitalize the first letter of every word. And the reason being that visually it's easier to read, whereas the left, it can be misinterpreted. And also a screen reader, when they read the left one, some of them will say hashtag SUSANBOYLE, whereas on the right, they'll say hashtag Susan Boyle and album party, because it will know where the next word starts. And I also want to highlight that Microsoft have got some interesting principles for designing inclusively. So we've got recognizing exclusion, solve for one, extend to many, and then learn from diversity. It's kind of simple ways to implement inclusive practice into when you're designing content. So email considerations for accessibility. So it's pretty much the same things you would do for the web. So parity is less supported for email clients than web clients. So what I mean is that there's a lot more support for the technologies we use for browsers. So like Safari, Google Chrome, Mozilla Firefox, to a certain extent, Internet Explorer. They're much more supported for websites than email software. So you've got Outlook, Gmail, Thunderbird, webmail, and then you can also access web across your mobile on apps, and then as well in the browser. And because of that, there's a lot more things that can go wrong basically on your email in the landscape. So it comes to what Victoria was saying, that presenting your content in such a way that it can be, it has a way that can be accessed in terms of its content value easily. So you can, if you have an image, that image can be seen across many different devices technologically. So in general, keeping it simple is better. Alt tags where you can for images, and make sure you've got a good content flow. So what I mean is that it's easier with emails, especially, to read from the top down. So title, image, paragraph, quote, etc., rather than having content flow that's based on, I don't know if you can see my screen, but if you have something up on the left, then something down on the right, and they relate to each other, and you need to jump from one to the other. For example, you can use arrows or anything like this. What happens if you have it across many different email clients is that may not load how you want it to load. So then the content flow will break very easily. So make sure to, I would say, keep it simple, straight down. 2-column doesn't always work so well. And especially it's important to have descriptive link text in emails. The reason being that if you just have here and then a link, it also flags for spam filters because it's classed as an aggressive link. So that's the main things that I find when I'm working with websites as to how you can continue to keep accessibility in the front of your mind when you're making your content. There are more, but it's mainly good content flow, links, descriptive links, alt tags. So what I think someone emailed in with a question saying, how can I handle this if I'm working on my own? Because it's quite a lot to handle. Absolutely, great question. So it's easier to do it as you go along. So every time you upload an image, just add the alt tag there. And depending on the system that you're using, the CMS system, once it's been added in once, normally it can be reused over and over again. It's much easier to do it as you go along rather than going back for over 6 months of content and checking the accessibility and redoing things. So I'm just going to check the chat.
Great, thanks, Yannick. I think there was some really practical applications there and really simple for anyone to follow. So and lessons that I've been aware of for all the time. I think that was really useful. So thank you for that. So yeah, please, everybody, if you've got any questions, now's a great chance to ask them. So please put them in the chat. As I said, we do ask you to submit questions in advance as well. And I wanted to start off with this question while I give people a chance to think of some questions. The Arts Council asks, as part of their annual survey, whether your websites are AA, AAA rated. Do websites have to be AAA certified? Does anyone? Yeah, that's the question.
I can answer that. Firstly, I'd encourage you to check in with the Arts Council for exactly what they want. But my short answer would be no. Reason being is kind of what I said earlier, is that it's good to have basically, if you have a AAA certified website, that is fantastic. However, it will probably be very functional and quite minimal. So for example, the .gov website, I'm sure we're all familiar with it after the last year. That is a AAA accessible website, but it's quite boring. It's quite functional. You know what it does, you know how to use it. And so while that is great, you know, it does the job, we tend to find that certainly our arts clients need a bit more flair. You need a bit more interaction, but there's a bit more to offer there in terms of content. And so some of those things have to be sacrificed. And they're not, if you go and check the guidelines, you'll see that quite quickly that AAA ratings are quite extensive, whereas AA is much easier to achieve and is still a very good standard to aim for. And like I say, it's best to go for that AA and try and pick the features that you can of AAA to make sure that everything is as good as it can be. Another thing I didn't get to mention earlier actually is video content. That's another key one, which you know, admins can control, making sure that your videos are captioned and well supported. And you know, YouTube and Vimeo have great tools to help you do that. So my takeaway is go for AA, try and pick as many AAA features as you can.
It also depends on what audience you're designing for. So for example, especially it's clear when you're thinking about translations. So if you're mainly presenting content in Russia, then it could be a consideration to make sure that you have a Russian translation version of your website, which this kind of excessive AAA accessibility point would not be so relevant to have Russian available if you're presenting content mainly in the UK or mainly in Italy, for example. So it depends on your audience and how far you need to go, or how far, because as well, the more people, the more users, or the more groups that you can include, the more that your content will be seen. So it's always, is there more? There's always this question of, is there more that I can do? And the answer is almost always yes, but it's how far you want to go and how far you need to go.
I just saw a question in the chat asking what the AAA features are, and I think if I can't share screen, but I'll read some out in terms of AAA. And so, for example, the first AAA one is sign language. Provide sign language translations for pre-recorded videos, and that's, you know, fairly easy to do if you've got the budget and contacts and you're able to find someone who can sign. That shouldn't be too much of a problem. Another one is provide alternatives for live audio. Provide text alternatives for pre-recorded videos. Your contrast ratio, they've given a standard for that. Don't use images of text. So if you have like a banner and it says, you know, our new season, that's not advised. So, you know, they're not, it's a very good standard, but they're not, you know, a lot of them can be achieved. It's just some of them are slightly more technical and slightly more, there's a bit more lengths that you have to go to fulfill a fully AAA website.
Mark has a question, Mark Jones, and I'm just going to read it out because it's a little long. Is there a way to embed an alt description into an image so that it's automatically added into whichever platform you're uploading it to, if it supports that functionality? I've noticed in WordPress where some fields are automatically populated from an image's metadata. I don't believe there is. It's my quick answer.
Not into the image itself. Yannick can correct me if I'm wrong. But certainly the way WordPress works is it will, if there's no tag given, it will generate one from the name of the image, I believe. So that's why it's populated from metadata. I would encourage to have a look in the CMS for you're using, whatever it is, and make sure that you know there's a way to add the images in. Yeah.
Okay, is Yannick going to check it now? Okay.
It may be, there are new image formats. I mean, we can go from JPEG, PNG, and we're going into sort of new image formats are being more supported. So there may be things that are happening. I do know of like image formats changing recently or being updated. So there may be things supported. But to answer your question of that it's used everywhere, this will probably take time if this is added. So it's definitely a good idea to do a manual check and not rely on the automatic.
I saw another one from Jeanette about the emails, and actually this ties into something else. So I think the point Yannick was making was that if a link is not described properly in an email, sometimes it sets spam filters off because it's marked as an aggressive link by the email client. So basically the email client will go, I don't know what this is, and therefore it's probably not a good thing to give my friend Ben. And so it will put the email in the spam. But just to emphasize as well that actually accessibility is a ranking feature for SEO on websites. So it's doubly important to make sure you're at least making an effort across the board.
We've got a few minutes left. I can see a couple more questions, which either we will carry on answering in the chat box, or we'll put answers on the website when we upload this tomorrow. So guys, if you want to answer any of those questions in the chat box now, let me just take it. We're going to obviously share those. We promised to share those links with you in a few moments. So we'll do that before the hour is up. I just want to just let people know on the next slide that we do have a quarterly newsletter. It's only once every 3 months, where we let you know about future webinars, any case studies, any new learnings that we want to share with you, and tips and insights. So I think Meg is about to put that link into the chat box in a moment. So please do sign up to that if you want to hear about future webinars. And talking about future webinars, we've got 3 that I want to tell you about now. One of them is next month. We are talking, the marketing team here are going to talk about how to reach your target audience online. We're also talking at the AMA conference next month. So we're doing a session on understanding your audiences through data. So we're going to look at all the data that's, you can collect in products like Google Analytics and alternatives to Google Analytics, and share those and just see what sort of information you've got at your fingertips there for free. And then I'm really excited about our November one as well. This is quite a new topic for us. It's about looking at your website's carbon footprint and just thinking about how we can make our websites more sustainable. So this is going to become a big hot topic, and I think you're going to all be hearing more about this in the future. Phoebe, in the meantime, is planning a new schedule of webinars for the new year. So if you've got any ideas for webinars you'd like us to cover, please put them in the chat box now. Equally, before you go, we would love to hear any takeaways that you've got from today. It really gives us a bit of feedback on how this session has gone for you. So yeah, love to hear about that. Any more questions, just put them in the chat. Other than that, we'll just stay around for couple more minutes just to answer any of those questions in the chat box. But otherwise, thank you again for joining us today. It's been a real pleasure for us, and we hope to see you again in a future webinar. Thank you.